Hi, Dr. Lubetkin. Thank you so much for joining me and sharing with our Mindful Paleo 30 group. I'm so excited to be speaking with you and having your insights for our group. So tell us, Dr. Lubetkin, tell us a little bit about your background and what you do. If you could do that, that would be great.
Sure. Thanks so much for inviting me, Tina. It sounds like a very inspiring program. I have been a practicing psychologist for 20 years, and my search through the whole journey has been to find a way to get into the body when I'm working with my clients, which, as a psychologist can be challenging. It's not a field that involves physical touch in any way. But I've always recognized how much the body holds and how much the body wants to communicate. So I had searched for years and trained in mindfulness and hypnosis and all kinds of ways of going in. And finally in 2007, I took my first workshop with Amy Weintraub, who's the creator of Life Force Yoga, and she wrote the book Yoga for Depression. And once I experienced that weekend workshop, that was just the beginning of a journey that continues today. I trained with her in Life Force Yoga. I got certified right away and started to integrate Life Force Yoga practices into my psychotherapy practice. A few years after that, I went back to Kripalu and I got certified as a yoga teacher so that I could also teach yoga classes and work with my clients in my office on the mat if I want to. So really being able to full out incorporate everything that Life Force Yoga has to offer, including the asana or physical practices of yoga. So I see my individual clients. I teach a weekly yoga class at Jaipur Yoga in Montclair, a Life Force Yoga class. Mm-hmm. And I'm on the faculty of Life Force Yoga trainings. I direct the mentoring part of the Life Force Yoga Healing Institute. So it's really become deeply woven into my life. And of course I lead workshops and all kinds of things too.
Terrific. I'm so excited that I found you. You're so inspiring and your background's so inspiring. So tell us a little bit how you incorporate yoga and Life Force Yoga's approach and philosophy to your clients.
Sure.
Yeah.
This is one of my very favorite things to talk about.
Awesome.
So what's beautiful, what I find most beautiful about Life Force Yoga is that it's a very individualized practice. So it looks different for everybody. It's a very natural and intuitive practice. So it may look like having a psychotherapy session that at some point during the session incorporates some pranayama or breath work. It might incorporate some visualization. It might incorporate some standing poses. Really, the whole idea with Life Force Yoga is what my teacher calls meeting the mood on the mat. We all have a mood state that we meet and greet every day of our lives. We all have them, and we all have some mood fluctuation. It doesn't have to be something like trauma with a capital T or anxiety with a capital A. And of course we're trying to get away from those labels anyway. So basically, whether I'm working with somebody individually in the psychotherapy setting or I'm doing a private Life Force Yoga session, it's always about meeting the person where they are, what mental state is arriving that day. So it may be anxiety, it may be depression, it may be sorrow or grief, it may be out and out fear or panic. So whatever it is, we go right in. And with Life Force Yoga, layer practices. We give the mind a bone. I'll share a practice with you later so you can all really feel what I mean by that. And it's to me, again, what sets it apart is it's this very intentional and individual practice. All yoga is wonderful, for the endocrine system, and for mood. So this just takes all of what yoga is and makes it even more specific.
That's great.
Really juicy and really specific for each person.
Awesome. Dr. Lubetkin, so as a health coach, I work with people who actually may have underlying anxiety and stress that they don't realize actually come out in various ways with their relationships with food, their relationships around themselves, with others. So can you tell us a little bit about, the process of uncovering some of those mood issues or things like that might come up that help us to be able to, that we might be able to be more aware of, or any insights around that?
Sure. So we start with that same idea of meeting the mood where it is. And of course, Life Force Yoga and all yoga is a very compassionate practice. We learn to be more compassionate to the self, less self-judging. But what can happen if somebody's working, let's say, with food issues or disordered eating? Again, we don't like to get into a lot of labels, but in other words, when the anxious mood arises, right? There are many, many ways to meet the anxious mood. Usually what we see with some of the eating and the food-related issues would be some racing thoughts, some very stuck kinds of thoughts, thoughts that may feel like they're controlling the person or feel very intrusive. They tend to be really long-standing, habitual, old patterns. So we meet that right where it is. And with Life Force Yoga, what we teach people to do is what I really want people to understand is that we often can feel like a victim to our thoughts. And with these practices, we can reverse that and learn to pilot our thoughts and pilot our nervous system, right? So we're the one in charge, and we learn that we can actually change our physiology so that when that anxiety appears, if there are ruminative, kinds of thoughts, whatever's triggering them, we learn to create space between the thoughts. We learn to not become the thoughts, that's not who we are. So many practices can address that. There's not one practice that would fit all situations or people, but that's the beauty of working one-on-one is we can really tailor these practices.
That's awesome. That's so great. So what kind of specific strategies and tools can you recommend, or insights, even as simple as breath work, or what kinds of things might you suggest for people who are in very high stress situations, who have underlying anxiety? They don't even realize they have it, and how it relates to behaviors around food, and behaviors around self-care. So any insights about any recommendations for people?
Well, there are loads.
I know, right?
But I'll try to narrow that down a bit. Look, within all of yoga, meditation practices, breath practices, we learn to sense into the body. People detach and check out for many, many reasons and may not have awareness of what their thoughts or sensations or drives are, so it can be very nice to work individually in a situation like that, but also going to yoga classes, especially the styles of yoga, that might really meet emotional states a little bit more. But in terms of what I do, working with somebody one-on-one, again, I'm going to come back to the same thing. It's meeting the mood where it is, and working with folks to be able to identify the thoughts when they come up, the thoughts that are creating all of the urges, impulses, anxiety, right, other symptoms, and to really intervene right away, right? That it's more important to work on the physiology and to calm the nervous system immediately than it is to think about or talk about, even in a psychotherapy setting, what the issue is. We could talk about these things forever, right? And, for most of us, stuck patterns, whatever the stuck patterns are, have been old tapes that have been running maybe for a lifetime. Most people don't need to do a whole lot of talking about it anymore, right? So if we get into the physiology, that, and we have research now, Western research, to confirm that we can change our neural pathways, we can change our programming through these practices. We have evidence-based research. Amy Weintraub, my teacher, has 2 evidence-based studies on life force yoga practices, one to treat depression and one to treat trauma. And there's a load of research out there. But the bottom line is, just for today, given the time, we go into the physiology. We learn how to pilot. We learn how to create space. We learn how to activate the parasympathetic nervous system, the calming response, and then from that state, talk therapy can happen, processing can happen, insights spontaneously arrive, and maybe most important, we learn to disidentify with those old tapes and those old stories.
That's terrific. So, Dr. Lubetkin, do you want to try something?
Yes,
today?
I would love to share a practice with you today.
Great.
It's one of my favorite practices, and it's a wonderful practice for all kinds of anxiety. It calms the whole nervous system. Now, with that caveat, you know, most people that I've worked with over years of practice and training love this practice, but I would always want to say, full permission. If you don't love it, that's okay. Sometimes, you know, and this is what it's always about, is like finding practices that meet people where they are. So this is a very ancient practice called Brahmari bee breath. It'll calm the nervous system by really increasing the exhalation. It slows down the exhalation. Whenever we do that, it's very grounding. We'll also use what's called a mudra, which is an energy seal, another way of directing energy to the nervous system where we want it to be. So I invite you to find a comfortable seat with your feet grounded on the floor. And there are a bunch of steps here, but it's a lot of fun. So we'll be making the sound of a buzzing bee. We use a lot of sound in life force yoga. Sound vibrates the fluid body, the energy body, almost like an internal massage. So if you come to my class, for instance, you'll hear all kinds of lovely sounds like ohms and hums and but for today we're going to make the sound of a buzzing bee, but with the lips sealed. So it sounds like this. Just trying the sound part first, you'll notice there should be a vibration in the throat. And then here are the other parts. We will use this mudra called Shanmukhi mudra that helps us to withdraw the senses and go super, super deep. So I invite you to bring your pointer fingers just above your brows, your middle fingers on your eyelids, your ring fingers rest just to the sides of the nose, not blocking off the airway, and the pinky fingers come to the corners of the mouth. When we go into the full breath practice, I'll invite you to draw the back of the tongue to the back of the throat, like you're scraping a popcorn kernel off the back of your throat. All of these components are essential components, and we will tuck the chin. We'll bring the thumbs to the cartilage of the inner ears, and once we begin, I'll ask you to press that cartilage closed, almost like you're a little kid trying not to hear what your parents want to say. So we'll be withdrawing the sense of sound and sight, and if that feels like too much for you, feel free to modify in whatever way feels just right. So I'll demonstrate one first. So once I take my inhale, I'll be drawing the back of the tongue to the back of the throat. There's a full inhale through the nose. The chin is tucked. The tongue makes that connection. The ears seal. I invite you to try it with me 3 times, and when you're finished, let your hands release to your laps, palms up. Begin with a big inhale, draw the back of the tongue to the back of the throat. Seal off the ears and begin. One more. Releasing the hands, palms up, keeping the eyes soft or closed. Sense into the left fingers, the left palm. Sense into the right fingers, the right palm. Sensing into the cheeks, left and right, the lips, the space behind the eyes, the forehead. Perhaps a sense of shimmering in that area across the brow, sensing into a feeling of spaciousness, perhaps a feeling of lightness or brightness. Taking another moment or so here to feel the effects of your bee breath practice, welcoming it into your mind and body. You may already feel like you could now sit in silence using this as a portal into a quiet meditation practice, which another time you may do. But for now, when you're ready, let your eyes float open and come back to where we were.
Awesome.
So I'll just say one more thing about this practice is it's wonderful for really getting to the thoughts in the sixth chakra across the brow, the place of clarity and intuition. So it's wonderful for intrusive thoughts, negative thoughts, thoughts that repeat, that feel stuck. My image has always been it's like taking one of those old-fashioned erasers on a chalkboard and just kind of erasing what's there. And for most people, it creates a beautiful place of calm and a place where there's probably going to be more of a feeling of control and choice and decision-making when it comes to food or any other impulse that arises.
Awesome. So just one quick question about that, Dr. Lubetkin. So for people who are not used to meditation and have difficulty really quieting their mind, what would you suggest for people and trying this in terms of what should they be thinking about, or how should they approach it?
They don't have to think of anything at all, and that's one of the reasons why I chose this practice, is that even for new yogis or new meditators, this is a practice that really gives the mind a bone.
Okay.
And that's because, again, this is a practice that also really demonstrates what we believe in Life Force Yoga, layering of different practices to get away from those stuck thoughts. So if you notice, we combined pranayama, the breath, right, an elongated breath, with mudra, energy seals, with sound. There's a lot going on that takes people very, very deep. So this is actually a great practice for those new to yoga and meditation, because it just tends to be really juicy and take people to a surprisingly deep place. I've had so many people say to me over the years, both in in trainings, professional trainings, workshops, or sitting right here in my office, people who have had really quite intense obsessive compulsive symptoms, when there's just no escape from the thoughts, and they are shocked at what this practice gives them.
And how often do you suggest doing this?
Well,
when?
This can be dosed as a daily practice. It can be, I love the idea of dosing practices instead of like dosing medication.
Right.
Although there's, of course, a time and a place for medication.
Yeah.
But that's how I like to think about it. So for the folks in your program, for instance, you might think about using this when impulses or cravings come up. And use this as a first line of defense, right? Go to a different room away from the kitchen or away from the food and do 3 to 5 rounds of Brahmari breath with a
Mm-hmm.
little bit of silence that follows that, and use it as a detour.
Mm-hmm.
And I would bet for at least some of you that would help to make a different decision about what to do with that craving, a different sense in the mind and body, more of a sense of connection between mind and body. So perhaps that craving or that impulse doesn't feel quite as big.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Lubetkin. That was awesome. So Dr. Lubetkin is a life force yoga practitioner, and she teaches at Jaipur Yoga. She has an office in Montclair, New Jersey, and you'll have her bio and link to her website if you want to get in touch with her. And just thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Namaste.
Namaste.